All right, let's dive into something pretty profound. We're going to talk about a question that, for a long time, seemed to have a simple answer, but modern medicine has forced us to get really specific about it. And that question is, what is the true final line between life and death?
I mean, think about it. For most of human history, the answer was, well, obvious, right? But technology, as it so often does, has thrown a massive curveball into the mix, complicating things in ways our great-grandparents couldn't even have dreamed of.
For the longest time, death was just when the heart stopped beating. Simple. You could see it, you could feel for a pulse. It was a clear, definite moment. But then, life support came along, and suddenly, we could have this situation where machines are keeping the heart pumping and the lungs breathing, but the person's brain, it's just gone. It created this weird new gray area that had never existed before, and boy, did that create a huge medical and ethical problem.
So, what was the answer to this massive new dilemma? Well, the medical and legal communities had to come up with a whole new definition of finality, a concept we now call brain death.
Okay, now look at the wording here, because it is so important. We're not just talking about some loss of brain function. The definition is incredibly precise. It has to be permanent, irreversible, and complete. And that includes the brainstem, the part that runs all the automatic stuff like breathing. This isn't a temporary thing. This is the point of no return. Period.
And to really get this, we've got to clear up some common confusion. People hear brain death, and they might think of a coma or a vegetative state, but they are totally different things. In a coma, there's still brain activity. There's still a chance for recovery. In a vegetative state, some basic functions might remain, but brain death? Nope. All function is gone. Zero potential for recovery. They are not the same thing at all.
So here is the absolute key takeaway. A person declared brain dead isn't almost dead or dying. No. In the eyes of both medicine and the law, that person is dead. Legally, their time of death is the moment that diagnosis is made, even if machines are still keeping their body going.
So, how did we get to this point? I mean, a definition this big, this important, it didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was actually built piece by piece over decades, responding to these new challenges as they came up. It's a pretty fascinating story.
It really all started back in the 60s, right when life support was becoming a thing. But the real game changer was 1968. A Harvard committee came out with the first solid criteria for what they called an irreversible coma. That was huge. It basically set the stage for the 1981 act in the US that made brain death a legal standard. And this is still evolving. Just in 2020, you had the World Brain Death Project trying to get everyone on the same page, globally.
Okay, so you're probably thinking, if this is so final, how on earth can doctors be 100% sure? It's a huge declaration to make. Well, the answer is that the process for diagnosing it is incredibly strict and careful for that very reason.
So what doctors do is a whole battery of tests right at the bedside. They're looking for any sign that the brain or brainstem is working. Do the pupils react to a bright light? Is there a gag reflex? Any flinch in response to pain? What they're looking for is a total absence of all of it. In brain death, none of those reflexes are there. The brain is just silent.
And this process is so thorough. First thing, they have to rule out anything that could look like brain death but isn't, like a drug overdose or someone being extremely cold. Then, it's not just one doctor. Two separate physicians have to do all the exams independently, and they both have to come to the exact same conclusion. And then there's the final definitive test, the apnea test. This is where they check if the brainstem can do the most basic thing it's supposed to do, tell the body to take a breath. If it can't, that's the final confirmation.
But this leads to something that can be really confusing and, honestly, heartbreaking for families. What about when a person who's been declared brain dead moves? How is that even possible?
Right, and the key thing to understand is that these movements aren't coming from the brain at all. They're actually reflexes from the spinal cord. See, the spinal cord can have some little electrical sparks of its own for a short while, even after the brain has completely stopped working. It's known as the Lazarus sign. And while it can be really startling to see, it's absolutely not a sign of consciousness or brain activity. The brain is still gone.
So why all this effort? Why was it so vital to get this definition exactly right? Well, one of the biggest reasons brings us to something incredible: the gift of life through organ donation.
This is where it all connects, because a person who is brain dead is legally dead, but a machine can keep their organs healthy. It creates this unique window of opportunity. an opportunity for modern organ transplantation to even be possible. It's a moment where one person's definitive end can become a new beginning for someone else, or even several people.
And even though it's the foundation for most organ donations from deceased donors, brain death itself is actually pretty rare. We're talking only about 2% of all adults who die in a hospital in the US. And that just goes to show you how incredibly precious every single potential donor is.
And different countries handle the whole consent thing in different ways. Here in the US, for example, it's an opt-in system. You have to make the choice and sign up to be a donor. But in other places like Spain or France, it's opt-out. That means everyone is automatically considered a donor unless they've gone out of their way to say no. Just two different approaches, really, both trying to save more lives. So it kind of leaves you with this really powerful thought, doesn't it? We have a definition that was literally born from technology, from a problem machines created. And now, that same definition makes possible one of the most amazing human gifts you can imagine. So how does that change how we think about an ending? And maybe, just maybe, a new beginning?